Hello everyone, and it's time for my 5th predictions video. This one's all about the Orcs and Goblins, so it's time for the war! Let's get started, like we always do, with an introduction for the Orcs and Goblins for the people that don't know who they are. The Orcs and Goblins is the faction that is a lot of tribes in the Warhammer world made up of greenskins. There are several types of greenskins, but not all of them belong to this faction. They are generally very savage by human standards, and there's even a type called Savage Orcs, which crank that up to 11. Orcs and Goblins love to raid, loot, and pillage just for the sheer joy of it. They are extremely diverse, with lots of themes all combined into the one faction. A few examples are the Savage Orcs, Night Goblins, and Black Orcs, just to name a few. There are 3 types of greenskins in this faction. Your basic Orc, which is your big, bullish, basic greenskins. They remind me of green monkeys with no hair due to their long arms, short legs, and their bad posture. They're also not the brightest. An example of this is how they think a catapult is a good way to launch their troops onto their foes' walls during a siege. Well, I say onto the foe's walls, it normally ends into the wall with a splat. Goblins are the smaller greenskin in comparison to the Orc, but they're also a lot more cunning, and they're a lot more human-like in their features, despite being sleek and sharp in comparison to a human, as well as smaller. And the third type of greenskin in this faction is the Snotlings. Snotlings are like tiny goblins with wee pot bellies, and they work in swarms on the battlefield to try and just nibble away at a soldier's foot to try and kill him, basically, is what they do. And also in the Orcs and Goblin society, they're generally toys and manual labour kind of thing going on there. Greenskins get bigger and stronger as they get older and higher up in their society, but this is not to be confused with a goblin becoming an orc. A goblin is born a goblin and will die a goblin, just like an orc is born an orc and will die an orc, and so on. A goblin cannot become an orc through this getting bigger and stronger. Orc reproduction is thankfully a lot less embarrassing than our own species. Orcs are all unisex, but generally considered male. Orcs give off a spore whenever, all the time really, orcs always give off spores. Whenever these spores reach the ground, they burrow into the land to create a sort of burrow womb. Now cue Gimli, this quote where he talks about dwarves always springing out of holes in the ground, but this time it's with orcs. Where the first orcs came from is often debated in both the Warhammer world and by us in the real world, with 2 main theories. The first of which is that the old ones created them for their great plan, just like a lot of the other races in the Warhammer world. This makes sense 40k wise as well, because that's how the 40k orcs were made. They were made to fight the Necrons, but we're not here to discuss 40k. This is often disputed though, due to the fact that the old ones would not create such a ruthless race, but many disagree. The second of which is that the old ones accidentally brought them from space when they came to the old world. Orc spores are persistent, and the only way to get rid of them is to make sure you burn everything an orc has ever been near. So you can see how it'd be easy for them to accidentally bring the spores with them from wherever they came from and infect their new home. This also makes sense in relation to 40k, with many people believing that fantasy is just one world in 40k, and this is a theory that seems to never die, always seems to reappear in the community every so often. Now on to orc religion. Greenskins have two gods called Gork and Mork. One is brutal but cunning, and the other is cunning but brutal. But orcs always argue which is which. And some of the orcs even say that it's in fact one god with an alter ego. Other orcs think that Gork is the god of the attack and Mork is the god of defense. But really this is still disputed, just like everything else in orc culture. Orcs call on the power of their gods to fuel their magic as well. Now on to the starting location for the orcs. I think the orcs will be a horde race-faction, just like the ones introduced in Total War Attila. So they could be pretty wide and scattered all over the campaign map. Just sort of like how the orcs are in the Warhammer world, with their different themes all coming from different sort of locations. The map on screen is where I think the main bulk of these orc hordes will come from. This map is just south of the Empire, and those mountains up the top are actually quite famous for keeping the Empire safe and funneling the orcs invading into a pass to be defeated Spartan style by the Empire. Now, how will the orcs play? I expect there will be a lot of variety in the orc factions due to their many themes. In fact, I feel it would be justified to have them classed as different cultures, so not even orcs and goblins as a single culture, as several. The Night Goblins tribes, for example, could be a culture of its own. Orcs like an aggressive playstyle, advancing in a horde, whilst weakening their foes with some of their ranged attacks before the main clash is entered. Your basic orc is bullish and he loves his close combat. They're a sort of middle ground when it comes to quality vs quantity, whereas the goblins are great for massing and bogging down your opponents. When it comes to ranged play, orcs and goblins are definitely a quantity and not quality army. You should still, and their ranged play should still be used to soften up your opponent. Orcs do have some very crude and very funny siege equipment, including the most accurate siege equipment in the game, an item called the Doom Driver Catapult. This throws living goblins with hand gliders to aim themselves for a sniping and suicidal effect. How they get goblins to sign up for this, I will never know. Orcs and goblins have two types of magics, one for orcs and one for goblins. Orcs' magic is offensive and they use it like they're ranged to soften up a foe before they get in and fight face to face. Whereas goblin magic is more cunning, they like to buff and debuff friends and allies alike. So there we go, there is the orcs and goblins. Well, the basics of them at least, and how I think they will play in the upcoming Total War. Thank you for watching, I hope you've enjoyed this. Stay tuned for more prediction videos coming soon.